No ordinary teenager
got onto the accounts of some of the most famous people on the planet.
Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Kanye West, Jeff Bezos, Apple itself, all hacked by the same person. This was the single biggest breach in Twitter history. And who did it? Plugwalk Joe, a kid born in the United Kingdom. But he wasn't growing up as a criminal mastermind. In fact, he started his youth off like a lot of us kids did, playing video games such as Call of Duty, Minecraft, GTA. But Joe would spend up to 16 hours a day on his console when he was a kid, and eventually he realized that he could start profiting off it. Now Joe was probably only about 12 or 13 years old at the time, and figured out that he could make money selling modded accounts, modded lobbies, and scamming players for digital currency. Now in hindsight to his future crimes, this was very harmless, but this would be the beginning of a rush. As Joe got older, the scams got a little bit bigger. He wasn't just playing video games anymore. He was running around with hackers, learning tricks of the trade, social engineering, SIM swapping, account takeovers. The deeper he went in, the more powerful he felt. And along the way, he found himself some popular friends, let's say.
Aiden, can you say something for me?
What?
Can you say free Plugwalk Joe?
I know, is that the guy who like SIM swap Obama?
He was on SSB World with us.
Yes, I know. Him and Rice were making a server together.
We will get into this later, but let's get into the first notable hack that he had committed. Come around September of 2018, and Apple had just announced the brand new iPhone Xs. At this time, this was a $1,000 phone, and a YouTuber was up and coming at this time, let's say. Logan Paul. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. At the time, he had around about 17 million subscribers, and he had just released a brand new video. Strangely, it was just titled Giveaway. Essentially, the video would prompt you to click a link in the description to claim your free iPhone. Now, around about the same time, they got access to his Twitter as well. He would use Logan's Twitter to tweet out a bunch of ridiculous stuff, and also use it to shout out a bunch of people. Now, within these, he shouts at a specific account by the name of Plugwalk Joe. This tweet would read, "Follow Plugwalk Joe, the realest on the planet, and I'll drop Logan Paul's tape." This post would be removed very quickly, and Logan Paul would re-access his account. Now, this first initial hack, while it may have been harmless, was the beginning of what was to come. Logan's account was a test to be able to see how effective SIM swapping was. It sounds technical, but it's simple.
It was an AT&T employee that switched my SIM card to his SIM card, and all the text messages went to his phone. He could see everything I was typing in my phone. So when I changed my password, he saw what the fuck I changed it to.
Joe didn't do any of this stuff alone. He worked with others to pull this stuff off. He would call the mobile carriers pretending to be the victim. They used leaked data, fake IDs, and smooth talk to fool the employees into handing over control of that phone number. It is also suspected they had an insider at Verizon, AT&T, and in the UK they had somebody working for 3. Now, leaning into the September of 2019 come to January of 2020, these guys made it clear who they were. They went on a spree of causing havoc on Twitter. From hacking King Batch, James Charles, Chloe Grace Moretz, Shane Dawson, and even the owner of Twitter himself. Now, come around of June of 2019, the actress Bella Thorne's Snapchat was hacked. This gave these kids access to all of her private messages and photos. Joe would reach out to her via text message. He essentially threatened to release her private photos if she did not praise him publicly. She would instead do the complete opposite and post the photos herself and also post all of the text messages along with it. This would be a massive mistake. Understandably, Bella was furious at this and decided to take matters into her own hands. She got into contact with private investigators, the FBI, and local police. Now, during all of this, news companies ended up figuring out how these kids were doing it. Newsletters were coming out, influencers making videos on how it had happened. This wasn't looking good.
Around the same time, Joe and his crew were able to hack into a Manhattan-based crypto group. A few of Joe's friends had been watching the co-founder of the project for months prior. They gathered all the information they would need to bypass the security questions when calling his phone provider. They also found his phone number, and this is where the heist began. By SIM swapping the co-founder, they essentially had access to all of the company funds. And just like that, they had stolen around $795,000. Now, this next bit is actually hilarious. Joe and his crew got all of the company executives into a Skype call and began taunting them for over an hour, laughing at them saying that they got hacked by a bunch of little kids.
Now, in the legal documents, we can actually see that these kids did not think this through much. The execution was perfect, but the actual getaway plan was terrible. Now, directly after the heist, Joe and his friends tried to clean the money and money launder it.
Shortly after the big heist, Joe had set up a Binance account in his own name. He then received around about $118,000, which were traced back to the stolen funds, which made it extremely easy for law enforcement to detect this.
Now, shortly after the big job, Joseph had fallen out with his friends. As seen in the legal documents, this was supposed to be a wake-up call according to his mother. His friends and co-conspirators were leaving many death threats, and this is what pushed him and his mother to move out to Spain. At this point, he had promised his mother he would never steal again and would leave this life behind. But boy was he wrong. During the 2020 period, Joe was very quiet. You didn't really hear much about him. However, it is known that he did meet a female and ended up becoming a little bit close with her. They would speak a lot. They met over a Discord server that was full of other people who did exactly what Joe did. And one day his hormones had kicked in and he sent a risky picture. Her reaction wasn't the best. She decided to take the photo, put it into the Discord group full of everybody who was there, and threatened to get him hacked. Joe wasn't about to let that slide. He decided to wreak havoc on her life. He got her swatted at least 6 times.
A lot of hate was also held at her family, and a lot of the things he did I can't even cover in this video.
Now his biggest mistake was going on Snapchat and bragging about all of these things. He said, I quote, "I doxed you and called your mom. I doxed you. Is that up?" And in another recording, he claimed he did not call the police. At this point, private investigators were all over Joe. They were trying their hardest to figure out who this kid is and where he is. They were getting females to fake phone calls with him and try and get him to show a swimming pool that was in his house. Remember how I said Joe loved to brag?
This time around, his bragging would get him into a lot of trouble.
There is breaking news tonight on what appears to be a major security breach at Twitter. The accounts of several major companies and public figures have been hacked in a scam.
The accounts include former President Barack Obama, presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, Kanye West and his wife Kim Kardashian, Elon Musk, as well as billionaires Michael Bloomberg and Jeff Bezos, as well as companies like Apple and Uber. The tweets seem to be a scheme to get Twitter users to purchase Bitcoin, that's a cyber currency.
Now what if I told you Joe had no actual involvement in the Twitter hacks? In fact, everyone to this day still thinks it was him, but this is common misconception.
The story goes he was trying to purchase a popular OG name, and the person who was selling the name had developer tools for Twitter. These developer tools were powerful. You could ban anybody, get into anybody's account, detach an email, add an email, anything. Now Joe didn't believe them for a second. He demanded that they sent a screenshot of these tools, and lo and behold, the person who had them did so. They spoke about Joe purchasing the username 6 for around about $10,000. But the big mistake was Joe took the screenshot that was sent to him and posted it on Twitter as a big middle finger to everybody else. Now Joe had no idea what these kids were going to do very, very shortly. Less than 24 hours later, and these guys would attack some of the most protected people in the United States social media accounts. And all the fingers pointed at Joe because of this post he made yesterday. It all added up. It's Plugwalk Joe, a well-known name. Now when interviewed about it, he said, "I don't care, they can come and arrest me, I have done nothing." Joe wouldn't have this nonchalant attitude for long. Just a day later, he contacted the React task force. React is basically the FBI for all cybercrime. He stated his innocence and told them he had absolutely no involvement within this hack. In fact, he helped React figure out who was who in the hack, who had sold him the name, and who had access to the developer tools. But the saying goes, the more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish. He then ended up telling the React task force member about all of his old hacks, including Logan Paul's one, and that prompted the FBI to open an investigation into his involvement with this Twitter hack. This was the turning point for Joe, where he went really quiet. He went on to play video games with RiceGum, Cuffum, Aiden Ross, and a few other big names during the 2020 period.
Hey, why you got it? You don't got no box for that? Fuck, you got a...
Yo, why is Joe front camera?
You just sit down?
Yo, Joe out here with the bust down, bro.
But during this period, of course, the FBI was still investigating him. Now remember, he was staying in Spain, and this was a part of the 14 Eyes. The 14 Eyes stems all the way back from World War II. It's basically a way for 14 countries to exchange international communications whenever needed. In basic terms, the FBI can request from Spanish law enforcement any information they need from Joe. This means all of his search history, his IP address, internet service provider, billing address. Now upon the FBI doing some investigations, they found that he had posted his own passport on his own Twitter. And then when they went through his Snapchat memories, they found a picture of his passport not covered up. They found out who he was, Joseph O'Connor. The FBI created a 51-page document of all of his crimes. Evidently, with this much evidence, they just had to get into contact with the Spanish National Police and get ready to take him down. In legal documents, we can see that they'd been conducting surveillance on the apartment for around about 4 months, and in all of that time, they had not seen him once. He had just been sitting inside at his computer for that entire period. Now eventually the Fed said enough is enough, so they decided to get together and raid the house. Now the Spanish police knew they had to be careful, because if he caught any wind of them doing this operation, they knew he could delete all evidence. But the Spanish police don't play games. They raided it very efficiently, and you can actually see in this photo here, a picture of Joe sat on his bed while feds combed through all of the evidence. There was enough evidence on his PC to just throw him straight into a Spanish jail before he could be extradited. His mother caught the first flight back to Spain from the UK and gave an interview. By roundabouts of June 2023, Joe was extradited and he was actually sat in pretty rough conditions while in this Spanish prison. He was booked into a federal prison in the US before he would face his court settlement. He settled for a plea deal, and a part of this agreement was to pay $794,000 to the company that he stole from and around about $120,000 to separate victims. He will have to serve around 5 years in a US federal jail. However, on good behavior, he could leave in half the time. Now, I do hope when he comes out, he changes his life and does something for the better, because honest to God, this kid is one of the smartest kids if you read his entire story. From young, he's had a very entrepreneurial mindset, and when he comes out, this kid can make big waves. But nevertheless, thank you for watching.